Imagine holding a Roman silver coin in your hand, heavy, bright, and trusted. You can buy bread with it, pay a soldier with it, settle a tax bill with it. For centuries, that little disc of metal carries something bigger than its weight: confidence. Now imagine that coin slowly changing. Not in the design. Empires still stamp their faces on money. The change is inside. Less silver, more filler, more almost. And most people don't notice at first. But over time, merchants start asking for more coins for the same goods. Soldiers demand higher pay. Taxes feel heavier. Prices creep upward. Trust slips downward. And then the government does what governments often do under pressure. It makes more money because it can. This is the story of Rome's currency debasement, how it worked, why it happened, and how it became one of the quiet forces that helped weaken one of history's greatest empires. What debasement actually means. Let's make the idea simple. In ancient Rome, money wasn't just paper promises. Coins had metal value. A silver coin had silver in it. A gold coin had gold. That metal content mattered because it set the coin's credibility. Debasement is when a government reduces the precious metal content of coins, usually by mixing in cheaper metals, while keeping the same face value. So the coin still says it's worth 1 denarius, but it contains less silver than before. In effect, the state is stretching its supply of precious metal to create more coins. It's the ancient version of printing money, except you're printing money in metal. And it's tempting, because it solves a short-term problem. You can pay expenses, especially armies, without raising taxes immediately. But it creates long-term consequences: price instability, distrust, and economic distortion. Rome's money before the crisis. For a long time, Rome's currency system was relatively stable, especially during the height of the empire. The denarius became a widely trusted silver coin. Even beyond Rome's borders, people accepted Roman money because Rome was powerful. Its trade networks were vast, and its coins were consistent. That consistency is everything. When money is stable, people plan. Merchants stock goods. Farmers invest labor. Soldiers trust their pay. Tax collectors can predict revenue. Rome's empire wasn't held together only by legions and roads. It was also held together by predictable systems: law, administration, and yes, money. But as the empire expanded, it also expanded the costs of maintaining itself. More frontiers to defend, more soldiers to pay, more bureaucracy, more grain to ship, more crises to manage. Rome became a machine that required constant fuel. And eventually, the fuel, silver and gold, couldn't keep up with the demands of the engine. The real pressure: the army, politics, and emergency spending. The biggest spending item in the Roman budget? The military. The Roman army was not cheap. Soldiers expected regular pay, bonuses, and retirement benefits. Generals and emperors also used pay and gifts to secure loyalty. In a world where armies could make or break emperors, paying the troops wasn't optional. It was survival. Now add political instability. As Rome entered periods of civil war and frequent leadership changes, every new ruler faced a terrifying reality. If the army doesn't support you, you don't stay emperor. So rulers spent big to buy stability, often through donatives, cash payments to troops upon accession. But where does that money come from? You can raise taxes, dangerous and unpopular. You can confiscate wealth, effective once, but politically toxic. You can borrow, limited by the era's financial tools, or you can debase the currency, quiet, technical, and immediate. Debasement becomes the invisible tax. It doesn't show up as a new law on a notice board. It shows up later, at the market, in wages, in prices, in trust. The debasement spiral. From denarius to silver-washed coin. Over time, emperors reduced the silver content of the denarius. One of the major turning points often discussed by historians is the 3rd century, when Rome faced a storm of problems all at once: invasions, internal conflict, economic disruption, and rapid emperor turnover. As the silver content declined, the coin's value became more psychological than metallic. To keep appearances, mints sometimes produced coins that looked silver-washed, with a thin outer layer, while the inside was mostly base metal. It's money that performs confidence rather than containing it. At first, people accept the new coins because the state says they are valid, and because rejecting official money can be risky. But markets learn quickly. Merchants start pricing based on the coin's real metal content. Older, purer coins get hoarded. Bad money drives out good money from everyday circulation, because people spend the worst coins first and keep the better ones hidden. This creates a world where the best money disappears from markets, and the currency in circulation becomes increasingly low quality. And once that happens, the state has an even bigger problem. It can't easily restore trust without a major reset, which is expensive and politically difficult. Inflation. Not overnight, but relentless. When people hear inflation, they often imagine a sudden explosion. In Rome, it could be slower, then accelerating. Here's the mechanism. If you produce more coins from the same amount of silver, the money supply increases. But the amount of goods, grain, oil, cloth, tools, doesn't automatically increase with it. More money chasing the same goods tends to push prices upward. Now add scarcity from wars and instability. When transport routes are threatened and farms are disrupted, supply drops. So you get a brutal combination. More money plus fewer goods equals faster price increases. And once prices rise, workers and soldiers demand more pay. Then the state needs more money to meet payroll. Then it debases again. Then prices rise again. That's the spiral. Inflation isn't just numbers. It's social tension. When money loses value, people argue more over payments, contracts, and taxes. Trust between strangers declines. Long-distance trade becomes riskier. Economic life becomes more local, more cautious, and less dynamic. That's not the collapse of Rome in one dramatic moment. It's the slow weakening of the empire's bloodstream. Taxes, wages, and the real economy. Getting strangled. Rome needed taxes in coin, in kind, in labor, to run the empire. But debasement interfered with taxation in complicated ways. If taxes are collected in debased currency, the government receives less real value than it expects. So the government responds by raising taxes, either increasing rates, tightening enforcement, or shifting toward collecting goods directly. That shift matters. In some regions, Rome increasingly demanded taxes in kind, grain, animals, materials, because coins were unreliable. That's a sign of monetary breakdown, when the state prefers physical goods over its own money. Meanwhile, wages become unstable. Workers want more money to keep up with prices. Employers struggle to plan costs. The poor suffer first because they hold cash and live close to the edge. The wealthy often protect themselves by owning land and goods, things that maintain value better than debased coin. So debasement doesn't just cause inflation, it reshapes society, widening gaps and creating resentment. And resentment is dangerous in an empire that depends on cooperation. From farmers to merchants to administrators to soldiers. Trust, trade, and the fragmenting empire. A big empire needs a big network, trade routes, supply chains, payments, and predictable exchange. When currency becomes unreliable, trade contracts become harder. Merchants add risk premiums, meaning higher prices. Long-distance trade declines. Local barter and local currencies become more common. And when commerce shrinks, tax revenue shrinks. When tax revenue shrinks, the state struggles to pay the army. When the army isn't paid or is underpaid, loyalty breaks. So debasement doesn't operate alone. It interacts with every other crisis Rome faced. In the 3rd century especially, the empire experienced fragmentation, breakaway regions, and constant military emergencies. Currency instability didn't cause every crisis, but it made it harder to solve them. It's like trying to hold together a giant structure while the nails are quietly softening. The attempted fixes, reforms, and the price controls. Rome did not ignore the problem forever. Various emperors attempted reforms, introducing new coin types, reorganizing mints, trying to restore confidence. But reforms are hard when trust is already damaged. One of the most famous reactions to inflation was an attempt at price control. A government trying to declare what things should cost. Price controls often appear when inflation becomes politically unbearable. They're an attempt to fight the symptom, high prices, without fully solving the cause, unstable money and disrupted production. But you can't command markets into stability by decree alone. If prices are forced too low, sellers hide goods, black markets grow, and shortages worsen. Rome's struggle with currency and pricing shows a timeless lesson. When money loses credibility, governments start reaching for bigger tools, rules, penalties, and controls because the quiet tool of trust no longer works. Conclusion: debasement didn't end Rome. It weakened it. So did debasement destroy Rome? Not by itself. Empires fall for many reasons: wars, politics, leadership crises, demographic shifts, external pressures, and internal fractures. But debasement is one of those hidden forces that drains strength over time. It makes everything else harder. It turns the economy unpredictable. It strains the state's ability to pay for defense. It amplifies inequality. It breaks trust in the marketplace. And it pushes the empire toward heavier taxation and control. Measures that can keep the machine running, but often at the cost of flexibility and growth. Rome's currency debasement is a reminder that an empire can look powerful on the outside. Banners, armies, monuments, while quietly weakening on the inside, one coin at a time. Because when money becomes less real, reality eventually sends the bill. VO, soft outro. If you want, I can also create a chaptered version with on-screen text cues, B-roll suggestions, and a list of visuals for each minute, so you can produce this as a full documentary.